I am so excited to bring the fabulous Ros Audoin to the podcast today. Now, for those of you who don't know Ros, I actually met her 5 years ago at the inaugural Converting Corporates event. So if you haven't attended a Converting Corporates event yet and you are wondering about the transformative powers of them, then dig in for this episode because Ros is about to share her epic journey from being a solopreneur who was genuinely considering whether or not selling to corporate would be a good fit for her, to being, in her own words, the CEO of a phenomenal leadership development company here in the UK. She now has a team of individuals delivering for her, and she talks very openly in this episode about how business has changed from being the person that sold one-off events like lunch and learn sessions and speaking gigs to being the person that is working with organizations for a year on leadership development. What I want you to take from this episode is the fact that Ros talks very openly about things that we typically shy away from in certainly the business space, and certainly in the British societal rulebook. We don't always talk about money, or, we're not always transparent about conversations. And she covers off a lot of gold in this episode about her breakthroughs since joining the C-suite all of those years ago. So she came along to Converting Corporates. She joined the C-suite in 2019. And this whole episode is her journey, the breakthroughs that she has experienced, and the key learns that she's had along the way. And she shares that really, really openly. I am going to leave you to enjoy this episode, but I 100% urge you, if you do like this episode and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm so inspired and I am so ready to be that person who does 4 sales calls to generate an £80,000 sale, that you join the C-suite. And it is not often I say that at the beginning of a case study episode, but this journey is absolutely one for the books. It's possibly one of the most powerful case study interviews that I've recorded. And I'm so excited for you to hear the journey from solopreneur to CEO. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. Welcome to the Selling to Corporate podcast, where we're going to be challenging your sales beliefs around selling to corporate organizations and help you increase your bottom line profits every single month. I am Jessica Lorimer, your sales expert and guide in this world of selling to corporate companies, skyrocketing your company sales and making the impact that you really want in the world. Now, don't forget, if you do enjoy the show today, please do head over to iTunes and leave us a review. But enjoy this episode, and I am really looking forward to sharing some epic sales wisdom with you. Welcome, 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 Ros. I'm so excited that you're here.
Thank you for having me.
No, I'm super excited. I was in your intro waxing lyrical about the fact that you speak the most number of languages out of any person that I have ever met. And I'm so insanely jealous of that talent.
I'm thankful for my parents, for being so insistent on speaking to us in different languages and forcing us literally to study and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I love that. I am currently on my 83rd day of Duolingo streak for French, which I did learn at school, but, have not used. I'm very rusty. But for those of you who weren't privy to our pre-podcast conversation, I was telling Ros that Owen and I have signed up for the Beaujolais Half Marathon. And I think it would be a good idea to go and be able to converse properly, as opposed to just asking where the police station is or how I can get 2 bottles of wine, which are my current limitations.
Yeah. Well, it's surprising how when you have to say it or when you have to remember, like, things do come. Yeah, I always say to people, learning languages is all about immersion, like being forced to having to speak the language. Then things come up the way they come up, like they come out the way they come out. Yeah. So, yeah.
What I'm taking from this is that I should move to France for like a year, just spend my time immersing myself in French culture and wine. And I'm not unhappy about
Yeah.
that. But thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm really, really excited to have you here, just so that everybody can get to know you as almost as well as I do. Could you give us a little bit of an overview of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. I am a executive coach initially, and then through this journey, I became actually the CEO of my company, which is a completely different thing. Our company is called Future Edge Group. We are a leadership development firm, and we support organizations in developing their leaders. We have several programs like a women in leadership program. We have senior leadership programs. We have a program that I'm really excited about actually at the moment, which is all about developing mid-level managers. Anyway, we really support organizations in making sure that their people are well equipped to do the job that they've been hired to do, in a nutshell. And I have an amazing team of people who support me with this work, which is really fantastic. We work in the UK, in the US, in the Middle East. It's been really fantastic. And all of this has been possible because I literally encountered you in 2019.
The biggest leap of faith, because
Yeah.
I'm going to say to you guys, as Ros was saying this, like we're on Zoom right now hanging out. I have like the biggest smile because she just described herself as the CEO of her company. Like she made that move. And we're going to dig into this because I remember vividly meeting you in 2019 at the first ever Converting Corporates event. And for those of you who haven't met Ros before, Ros is one of the most glamorous people I think I've ever encountered. And you are always, you look great. You're always really well made up. You've got this great sense of fashion. That must be the French, like that must be the cultural French immersion. And I remember meeting you, and you had so many great questions about what it was really like to sell to corporates. And it was this huge decision for you because previously you'd been focusing more in the business to consumer space, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I had back then I was doing more marketing strategy. My background was in marketing, and I had a few programs around that, selling B2C, which was quite interesting, but I really wanted to expand and grow. And do you know, it's really funny. I remember now. So I landed in that day because my friend had won a ticket to go to your first event.
Oh
And
my goodness.
yeah, and she was selling B2C, and she told me, Ross, you're always talking about the fact that you would like to sell to corporate. I have this ticket. How about I give it to you? I'm going to ask if we can, if it can be transferred. And then let's do an exchange. Like you go to the selling to corporate event, and then can you coach me on XYZ, something that she needed? And I was like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. Yeah. So when I got there, I didn't know you. I didn't know anyone in the room, but I had the best day ever. And it was a no-brainer for me. After that, I was like, of course I'm joining. Like I still remember some of the clients that you had that are now really good friends of mine, that were giving testimonies about working with you and the transformations that they had been able to achieve. It's amazing. It's amazing.
That's so funny. I'd completely forgotten about that. It's like the ultimate synchronicity. I love it. And so I think the interesting thing for people is always in understanding the journey, because I think that especially when you start out selling to corporates instead of selling B2C, there is a big shift. And I think that lots of people feel quite nervous about, well, what's going to happen? And I know that for a lot of people, there's this like, do I just have to give up my business to consumer business and then build this? And talk us through what happened for you. What's your journey looked like over the last, gosh, 5 years?
Yeah. Yeah. At the beginning, so it was a lot about income, right? So I was like, I can't just leave this and then not have anything yet on this side. But I remember actually talking to you about it, and you were like, okay, well, give yourself a date, like give yourself a deadline, right, for shifting. But there was a massive element of, okay, so for me, the biggest difference was when I was selling only to B2C, which I still do, but, like that's not my main kind of area of focus. When I was selling B2C, it was all about understanding the person's psychology, the person's, selling to the individual, getting them to understand the value for them and getting them to really align or see the benefit for themselves, right? And so it was a lot of around aspiration and stuff like that. When I started selling to companies, it was more about, right, what are the problems that you have that I can help you solve? And it was a conversation that was, there was no emotion around it, like that. I think the biggest thing was there's no emotional attachment around, oh, this is my money. Am I going to get, it was, okay, this is a problem that we have. You can help us solve it. Making sure that I understand what the problem was, making sure that I could actually go in there and create a transformation for them. It was a lot about understanding the way that they work as an organization, so it was a completely different dynamic. So it took me a little while to understand that conversation with corporate. And that only happens with practice, right? Like, I remember we used to have these calls where, you would tell us, okay, now you go and call, we were on Zoom and you would be like, okay, now go and do this or send this message, or, it was very like proactive. And at the beginning, I was scared to talk to corporates. I don't know, in my mind, I was like, and then you kept saying, these are people, they're people like you, like anyone else. And so practicing, having that conversation, having lots of calls where I was like, oh my gosh, that was terrible. Like, how could I have fixed that? Like what else could I have done? Like that was, and then I think in my evolution, I think a lot of it was around, okay, I'm just going to let go of the stress and nervousness of this is corporate and just really focus on how can I help this organization, right? Like getting clear on who they are, what they tried before, what they're seeking. Because sometimes, people say they want something and quickly that's not what they need, right? I think that's what kind of shifted me into lots of conversations after. Then I had my first client and then my second one, and then, it goes like that. So,
Isn't it? Because when I look at you and your business now, I don't remember a time that you didn't sell to companies. It's like, and it's been 5 years. Like for everybody listening, it has been 5 years. I think that's really important to note because sometimes we see these journeys and we talk so often about the short term. And like you say, you had all of those difficult things around, okay, how do I diagnose the problems that a corporate has? And how am I going to succeed on sales calls? And you make your first sale and your second sale. And that's when you start to think, oh, maybe this
yeah,
could be a thing. And then 5 years later, you're here, the CEO of a company that is hiring people to go
yeah.
into corporate companies and deliver your methods and, deliver in the way that and the style that you want people to deliver in. And that's a huge, huge change.
Oh my goodness. It's huge. It's huge, Jess. The other thing I can say now looking back, because it's really interesting how when you're and you're at the beginning, you don't really, you don't know what's going to happen, so you kind of just do things. But in looking back now, I have clients now that I've had for 5 years, right? Like we're still doing work. We're still, new people come, we still come in and we do work. One thing that has shifted for me, which I really hope is helpful for some of your audience, is that, you know, like you can't be like stressed about, I need to get a client, I need to get a client, like I need to close the deal, close the deal. That is not, and you used to say that as well, actually. Like it's about, we need to think about the long game. We need to think about what I'm sowing seed, right? Like if I want a tree, the tree isn't going to be, I'm not going to sow seed today and then all of a sudden I have a full blown tree, right? Like it takes time. You get smaller wins. Like for example, I would sell, a speaking, a lunch and learn, or I would sell a smaller thing. And then I would nurture the relationship. And then the next year they're like, oh, we're doing this, International Women thing, we'd like you to come back. And then I would do something. And then as we had conversations, then I would get more involved, so there's like this evolution. And if I was kind of like freaking out, oh, it's about the money, or oh, it's about, getting the deal now, then I would have missed a lot of smaller opportunities and conversations that actually have led our company to amazing success. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's that thing of like, just trusting the process and trusting that, every little step that we take in our business will actually lead to something. I've had people that, like they would say, no, thank you, right? Like, no, thank you. We're not interested, whatever. And then 6 months later, I get a referral from someone and they're like, oh yeah, it's this person. Then I go to LinkedIn, I look and I'm like, it's this person who told me no, thanks.
Yeah.
So it's doing it consistently. It's still being, when people at first I would send messages and people would be like, no thanks. And I feel so like I'll take it so personally. But then people like that would refer me anyway. So, it's about, keep doing the same things that work, really trusting the process, and at the same time dealing with all the mindset stuff that come up because we make things mean things that have nothing to do with the truth. Someone sends you a message saying, no thanks. I could make it mean that, I'm not good enough, or that, no one's going to buy from me or whatever. And it's really regulating. Okay, I just got to know. It's not yet, not now, right? Yeah. So
And there's so much in there. I mean, the piece that you first mentioned about being detached from the outcome, I think it's huge
yeah,
because, and I think it's really difficult. I think as a new business owner, when you're creating your sales strategy, and actually one of the things that the B2C world I think has done badly over the last few years is to tell people, "Oh, it's instant, it's instant, it's instant." You can have quick wins. Yeah, absolutely. Like even programs like the C-suite will teach you how to have quick wins. But actually for the longer term, for building a business as opposed to having a solopreneur mindset of I'm jumping from this sale to the next sale, you have to have that detachment. You have to be able to create enough opportunities in your pipeline, which means doing enough volume of work so that you're just sort of like, oh, okay, cool. When you get the no thanks, you're just like, all right, not right now, whatever. Like, see you in
yeah,
3 months, see you in 6 months.
yeah,
And, I think that's been a huge shift in mindset and confidence for you and for a lot of people. I laugh because even I do cold outreach now, and I had a response yesterday from somebody who was like, no, we never look at this. And I was like, oh, and I wrote back, I was like, oh, interesting. I was like, do you think you should?
yeah,
I thought, and I
yeah,
was like, do you know what? Jess of like 2011, when
yeah,
I was young and like, stressed about everything and didn't want to get fired from my job, I'd be like, oh my God, should I say? And I was just like, do you think you should? And do you know what? They came back, they were like, actually. And I was just like, yeah, here we go. And it's at that point that you realize that sales is just conversations between human beings. And I think
yeah,
that's what's been so interesting. You've taken everything that you knew from your marketing background and the psychological aspect that you would apply in B2C and gone, yeah, actually, it's kind of exactly the same, except it's not as complicated. You just have to have the conversations as opposed to do the mass marketing around it, right?
yeah, absolutely. To be fair, at the beginning, if there's a cash flow issue, you want quick wins. And that's why I think in the program, you have some really great suggestions for those quick wins, right? Like, the lunch and learns for me were amazing, or the speaking opportunities, So that was really good. But yeah, but having that mindset of this is not a sprint, it's a marathon, and doing the things. And this is another thing. Oh my goodness.
I love
I
it.
know I could talk about
Producing
it for
yourself.
hours. But this is the thing, is that sometimes when you're doing, so it's a numbers game, right? Like, it's having enough things in the pipeline means that you're constantly adding things to the pipeline. And that is the most boring and uninteresting thing that
Yes.
someone can do, right? But we want to focus on the things that are tangible, visible, that we can celebrate, that people can see we're doing or whatever, right? And so these boring things that you do behind the scenes, they're actually the foundation for the big things that you celebrate later. But and this would happen to me. Like I would be like, okay, go, do the foundational stuff. And then I would stop, or I would gain a little bit of momentum with a client that gave me a bit of attention. And then I'd stop. And then I'd be like, oh no, now I don't have enough in my pipeline. And it's that thing of building the discipline of every single day I'm doing something, like every single day, there's something that I'm doing that is going to actually bring me some new people that are going to encounter me, that are going to discover me, that are going to, I'm going to interact with, and they might not be interested now. They're not ready now, but they might be ready maybe later. But if I'm not doing that boring stuff that nobody sees and that is like, that if I wouldn't talk about if I went to a dinner party, like
Oh, no, like I tell everyone, like sales is incredibly boring. Like it's
yeah,
just process. You show
yeah,
up, you do the things, and everyone's like, oh, but it's so glamorous. I'm like, no, no, the actual process, very, very dull. But
yeah,
the wins, 100%, super cool. And I'm completely with you. I think everybody on the podcast, and you definitely, unfortunately, over the last 5 years have heard me say more often than I'd like to count, what you do today will impact your business in 90 days.
yeah,
So if
yeah,
you are somebody who is sat on the sidelines and you're like, oh, I've got this one opportunity and I'm going all in and I'm not doing anything else to generate any other opportunities, in 90 days, you're going to see the result of that because that's what happens.
yeah,
If you sit down at Christmas, I take every December off. And if you sit down at Christmas and you don't do any planning for how you're going to come back in January and what you're going to do, it's quite likely that in 90 days' time, in that February, March period, when everybody else is going on about how great financial year end is going to be for them, you're
yeah,
stressing and not closing deals because it's those 90-day cycles. And I think that's always so important to think about and consider. I also love what you talked about there about when you started out, things like the lunch and learns and the speaking gigs were really good for cash flow and quick wins for you. That's now changed dramatically in terms of what you're selling now to organizations. Could you sort of elaborate on the difference? Because it,
yeah,
the offer situation is very different now in terms of
yeah.
way and depth that you work with clients.
Yeah. So now we do programs inside of the organization. So we go into the organization and we have a structured conversation. Thank you, Jess. About what they need, really understanding. Actually, I'm going to go back. So one of the things that work really well for me is the executive roundtables, because then people talk about the issues that they have. And so when we invite them to a conversation after that, we already know, like we have an idea of what they're struggling with.
Yes.
So having a conversation around what they perceive their problems to be and really trying to help them see that a more immersive experience for their team would actually bring bigger transformations that just a training, saying, or so we combine like workshops and coaching. And then we deliver programs between 3, 6 months. We have companies that we've done programs for a whole year. And that is it's just a beautiful way to really walk through a transformation. And then after each engagement, we go back to the conversation. This is what happened. Then this is what else do you need? Do you know what I mean? Because we want to make sure that, if there's anything else that they want to help with, that they know that we're actually the right people to help them. Yeah. But a lot of these clients, we started doing a one-off fire chat conversation or lunch and learn, or and then we expanded the conversation.
Mhm.
So we did something that was really simple, easy to deliver, and then we were like, hey, they would be like, oh, our people really love that, and I'd be like, great, so let's have a conversation about what else we could do. But you know what, like at the beginning, I have to say, I would be so embarrassed to extend that conversation afterwards.
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh, thank you. Okay, great. You were great. Okay, thank you. And then I wouldn't really proactively do that. Now that's not the case anymore. But I had to work on my own mindset of, don't leave any, just, any possibility needs to be explored, right? And it's up to me to have the conversation. What's the worst that can happen? They'll say no. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Then it, isn't it? I think it's interesting because people, I hear a lot people say, oh, organizations only want to do something as a tick box exercise. And it really frustrates me because, in my opinion, the responsibility is on the seller to help an organization and stakeholders within it, A, identify the problems that they're actually experiencing, because 9 times out of 10, they don't understand why something's happening.
Yeah.
B, understand the transformation that they're missing out on
Yeah.
if they are not taking further action on something. And
Yeah.
C, closing open loops, right?
Yeah.
Just like you mentioned there, it's so easy once you've sold something, you've delivered, you've done a great job to be like, okay, thanks, goodbye. Like, please write me a testimonial, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And actually, our responsibility as the seller is to be like, hey, I've got this process in place that helps me give your organization feedback on how that training was received. And let's have a look at some of the gaps that we've been able to identify. And
Yeah.
I think that that's something that's so underrated, but so powerful, because then the organization looks and says, oh, okay, great. Actually, here's somebody who's willing to partner with us on this journey. And
Yeah.
not everybody is. Everybody gets very caught up in the how can we stick a plaster on
Yeah.
the wound? And it's kind of like we talked about cash flow earlier, right? This
Yeah.
idea that we just have to make quick money. Not everybody is willing to partner with an organization and say, actually, let's, now that we've put a sticking plaster on this bit,
Mhm.
let's just take a little look at some of the other things that are going on and see
Yeah.
if you want to take responsibility and accountability for
Yeah.
change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another thing actually that has worked really, really well for us is that we have a conversation and then we go, okay, I know that you see that these are the challenges that you have. Let's do a little bit of a diagnosis to see what actually is going on. And
Yeah.
we sell that piece first, you
Yeah.
know? So, and we bring assessments, we bring psychometric assessments, we bring, and we have conversations around, we do interviews with people, and then we bring back a report and it's so solid because so instead of going, oh, okay, we can come and we'll fix it up. We're like, no, 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 no. It's like, okay, the analogy is imagine you break a bone
Yeah.
and then the doctor goes, okay, I'm just going to put a plaster. And it's like, no, like
Yeah.
let's do an x-ray, right? Let's do an x-ray, see where the bone is fractured, what's the direction, how it's fractured, blah, blah, blah. And then we can put not a plaster, like a cast or whatever it's called, but it's exactly the same. So we go into the organization, we're like, let's do some assessments to see where things are at. Then we produce a report and that tells them exactly what they need. And then they can choose to go big or smaller, but at least they really know what's going on. The other thing that we've started to do that has been really good for us has been like instead of going, going away and then creating a solution, it's like, okay, let's do a co-creation meeting where together we come up with what the actual solution is for your organization specifically, and then it's a no-brainer because they co-created it. It's like,
Be like, I hate that.
exactly.
Because we have these conversations inside the C-suite all the time. And that's the whole purpose, is to make sure that they are bought into the transformation that they want and the problem that they have
Yeah. Yeah.
and fixing it. I think that's incredibly powerful. It
Yeah.
also makes a massive difference to your average transaction value. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that's really interesting for people because, like you say, when you started out, you're selling things that are one-offs. That's how
Yeah.
a lot of people start. And to be clear, if you're listening to this episode, it is exactly the right way to start because
Yeah.
you need to test the water and figure out if you actually like working with corporates.
Yeah.
Let's go and do a program. But
Mm.
selling in this way massively increases the average transaction value of the amount that you're obviously going to be able to charge, and also the transformation value to the organization, which
Yes. Absolutely.
one,
Absolutely.
increases your revenue, two, increases your likelihood of getting referrals, recommendations, and future work from them
Yeah.
because you're
Yeah.
not putting the plaster on.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I was thinking as well about the fact that, oh, this is really, so at the beginning, I used to think that, you just have one conversation with someone and then they pay you and that's it, right? And I can say that most of the transactions that we close with clients, we've had at least 4 calls, right? Like 4 conversations. Like, so again, it's having that mindset of it's the long game. It's not just a wham bam, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay. We talk now, then we have another conversation. Then they're like, oh, we would like to bring in this other person. Then we have a conversation. And every single time we make sure that we ask the right questions so that we're moving it forward. But it's a process. And if we're thinking long term, we're thinking impact, then it's okay. We can have 4 conversations. If you're going to pay me 80K at the end of it, it's fine. You know what I mean? Yeah. And if I'm getting clear exactly on every conversation, we get insights, right? To what the dynamics are in the organization, how the person thinks, how they view like transformation, how they view their team, like all of these things, you get insights every single time you have a conversation. And the more information you have about the organization from an insider, the better the experience you can create for your clients, right? So yeah, that's been really good. And then I have encountered companies that it feels like, oh, they're doing this because it's a tick box exercise. But I think like my thoughts around this is, yeah, but you come in and you provide amazing information and amazing transformation anyway. So even if you feel like culturally the organization isn't invested in it, which that's happened to us, right? Like you close, you can completely see that this isn't something that HR was tasked to do. They're just executing it because, the C team said that it needs to happen, or because they want they want it to look good for their reputation, right? Yeah, but then you get to go in there and like deliver an amazing experience for their team anyway, right? So even if at a organizational level, maybe you didn't impact the C team and change the way they felt about stuff, but you still made it, you just still help people, which is as coaches and consultants and anyone in in this space, that's what we want. We want to help people. That's the whole reason why we exist, right? The business exists. So I wouldn't get discouraged by like cultural dynamic, and I would just still go in and deliver an amazing transformation.
I think that's a huge point. I think it's interesting because when people talk about tick box exercises, they can be quite disparaging about the company because it's a tick box exercise. But what nobody has really thought is that culture changes in companies. We're in a world now where we have 5 generations in the workplace. That's
Yeah.
a lot of different voices, ideas, perspectives. And so what is a tick box exercise for one person, one level, one group is not necessarily a tick box for another. And those are the people replacing, right? So the HR assistant who watches your tick box lunch and learn on well-being actually will be the future HR director who remembers, oh my God, I saw that really inspirational talk.
Yeah.
Who's that person? Where are they now? What are they doing? Let's get them in. So
Yeah.
I think
100%. Yeah.
that's it. It comes back. It always changes. And I think, that there needs to be a little bit less judgment about where organizations are and actually going, okay, how can we meet them where they're at? And how can we show them what they could be doing and the benefit of what they could be doing? And that's how you take that leap from being the person who does the one-off lunch and learns, and that's your bread and butter, to being like you were talking about there, where you're like, yeah, I'm happy to have 4 calls. They're going to pay me 80 grand. Like, lovely. Thank you very much. I'll do, I'll do my 12 calls a year and I'll make my 360K and thank you very much. Off I go.
Yeah.
I'll just relax. And I think that's the difference. It is 5 years of work. Like what we look at your company now and you as an individual are completely different to the person that I met 5 years ago in a room where you didn't know anybody, where you'd never sold to a corporate company before, where you were still focused on marketing. Now, we caught up a couple of weeks ago, which is why I asked you to do this podcast. And you very graciously said yes. but when we caught up then and you were talking about, yeah, now we're doing this and we're working on these types of programs and, and I was just like, sorry, who
Yeah.
is this?
I know. No. It's ridiculous. And like I am a firm believer that like investing in our personal development is a non-negotiable. Like there's no way that I could do what I'm doing now if I hadn't had knowledge that I gained through doing this work. And the knowledge from the information that I gained, from the action that I took, from the lessons that I learned, from the mistakes that I made, because I made lots of them, like, and I don't just say this because this is my space. I'm a coach. Like that's what, but it's so obvious when someone makes a decision, I want to change and I want this direction. And when they decide I'm going to go all in and they spend their money, they spend their energy, they spend their time, it has to grow. They have to grow. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I'm really, really grateful for that. And I think everyone should, at some level, invest in becoming a more solid person. I remember who I was. Do you know, it's funny. I always remember a conversation that we had, like we had a one-to-one, and you said to me, because I needed to make a decision and I wasn't sure. And you said to me, you know what's going on? You said to me, you haven't learned how to trust yourself, or you've learned that you can't trust yourself. And you probably don't even remember this.
Do you remember this? I'm
Yeah.
welling up thinking about it because I was like,
Yeah.
oh gosh, like it was
Yeah.
a conversation. A really
Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. I just need to make the decision, like just make the decision. And it's really interesting because a lot of people think, yeah, I need to work on my mindset before I do this. And the reality is that the best mindset work that you can do is to actually execute and do the work, and as the issues come, then you can face whatever challenge comes. But I feel like growth happens through implementation, through taking action, through doing the stuff that we're scared of doing. Like 5 years ago, you would have asked me, like me being in a room full of, like older men, there's a lot of the hosting an executive roundtable. I would have been like, there's no way I can do that. Like, who's going to listen to me? Seriously, in my head, I'm like, I'm still 12, like, listen to me. But, when I made that decision, do you know what? I know a thing or two about this space. I've studied, I've proven myself, I have lots of testimonials. I need to make a decision that I can do this. I'm the only one who needs to decide it. And then the feedback that comes afterwards just confirms, the decision that I made. It's a journey.
I'm just excited to see like what you do next year and the year after. And I think that for me is the most glorious piece about it, because it's like we've watched the last 5 years and the insane changes that you've gone through personally and professionally, and the company that's come out of it. And I don't think I've ever been as happy as when people say to me, and you said this to me a few weeks ago, you're like, I love the sales bit now. Like I love it.
I do actually. I know. I would have never said that 5 years ago.
Like, I hate sales. I don't like it. Like
I know. And do you know what? And again, it's the same thing. It's like you can't love something that you never do, right? Like how do you get to love something? It's that you do it again and again, right? And you do it badly and you do it. I mean, I remember having sales calls where I might get a blank, like, I would get so nervous. I wouldn't even know what to ask anymore, even though I had notes on what to ask, and it was so awkward, right? But you have to go through these moments if you're not someone who likes sales. And then you realize selling is just having a conversation with someone, trying to understand what they need and like the intention behind this is another one, right? Like, so if I get on a call and my intention is I need to close the deal, that doesn't work, right? If I get on a call and my intention is I want to get to know this person, like what's going on? How do you see your problem? Like, how does your company deal with things like that? Like, how do you feel about it? Like, what about your team? And you have a proper conversation. I've had sales calls that were like, okay, let's have 15 minutes. And an hour later, we're still talking,
yeah.
And it's like, great. Okay, well, where should we take this next? Right. And I remember the other thing, like that whole, okay, well, where do we take, what's the next step? Saying that thing at the end of the call at the beginning, I was scared of saying that. I would just close it and be like, okay, bye. Now I'm like, okay, great. We had a great chat. What's the next step? Let's talk about this. Or let's meet with this other person as well, and we're getting to know each other. This is great. And maybe I'll help you now. Maybe I'll help you in 6 months, but we had a great conversation. I get to know you and I offer insights anyway. So it's the intention of getting the business versus how can I help? I think that was a shift for me as well.
What you're talking about there is that it's the commercial pieces, and I think that for some people, they can get friend zoned quite easily because they fall so hard into like, how can I help you? And they provide free consultancy on the call. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
the value that you add on sales calls has always been through the questions that you ask. And it's, I know in the C-suite, we have those lists of like situational fluency questions and pain questions, impact questions, because it's so easy when you're a coach, when you're a consultant to fall into, let me tell you how to do it. And then instead of having next steps, people just exit the call. And they're like, oh, yeah, well, I can probably do that. And it's like, no, you can't. Otherwise, you've already been doing it. Like you've got to have that question.
Yeah.
That's super, super powerful. I guess
Yeah.
from my perspective, I'm nosy and everybody else in the podcast will be. But how often would you say you use resources from the C-suite now in comparison?
All the time. Like that. Like the thing is that at the beginning, you kind of I had my printed documents, whatever.
Yeah.
But now this just become the way that I talk to people, right? Like it's just become the process. It's not. I use them all the time, Jess. Like it's not. Yeah, like everything, the templates, I tweak this, I tweak that. Then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do a new campaign now. I'll tweak it again. I download again. Like that's just what we use. It's just
I love
yeah,
that. I think it'd be so easy for people to, especially when they've bought courses and things before, that they've not revisited, to think, oh, it's just a one and done. You do it for a few weeks.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Don't.
Yeah.
But for somebody to say, okay, well, actually, I've spent the last 5 years growing and honing and tweaking and testing and reusing, I think that's hugely powerful because it goes right back to what you're saying about using and doing those foundational things, which people
Yeah.
because we always
Yeah.
that trap of like, oh, we need advanced strategies, we need advanced this, because the marketing is
Yeah.
those things are sexy and cool. But for the majority of people, it's actually not. Growing £100,000 a year business to a £500,000 a year business to $1 million a year business, it's actually the same B2B sales strategies. You just execute them on a different scale.
On a different scale, you get more people involved. You have more calls. For 100,000, you need three. I don't know, 2 calls every. I don't know. If you want 500, you need to have more calls. It's a numbers game, right? Like, and I mean, it has a lot to do with capacity. How willing you are to let people in and let them help you, which is another discussion. But I think that it's the foundations are always the foundation. Like, again, going back to that whole planting a tree situation or example, there's not 400 ways. Like you sow the seeds, you water it, it grows, right? If you want 400 trees, you have 400 seeds or more. You water them and it grows. It's the same thing. So it's going back to the foundations again and again and again. And actually, last year I remember I went back through the material because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't leaving, because sometimes when you use something all the time, you might kind of like
little bad habits, you miss things out.
exactly, like habits creep in and whatever. So I go back and have a look and it's like, honestly, like for me it's a no-brainer. Having a process that works, it's easy, we just follow the process. And you know what, Jess, like I've realized that one of the biggest challenges that people have in coaching programs, and I see this more in the B2C space than in the corporate space, is that people kind of are I don't know, they struggle to follow a process. So they will invest money. They'll invest money
Yeah.
in a solution. And then when they invest money, after they've invested the money, then they just don't follow the process, or they're scared of trusting it, or they question the process. And it's like, just follow the process. Like, that's just, until you've done it to the T and it hasn't worked for you, which it won't, then you don't question it, because there's a reason why it's there, and there's a reason why you bought it in the first place.
I couldn't agree more. I think people almost expect like the paying the money is the hard part, and that
Yeah.
happen by osmosis, and the reality is very different. It is, you have to follow the process, and you also have to do that in entirety. You
Yeah.
can't choose.
We can choose. That's right.
That's
Yeah.
the bit. Like, people will say to me sometimes, they'll be like, "Oh, but I will do it. If I buy it, I will do it. But also, can I just do this as well?" And I'm like, "Well, you can, but I can't guarantee how that's going to work."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That brings us on really nicely, actually, to, I guess, my final question of the day. But like, we say it always at the end of these episodes, we have lots of people listening who are sat there thinking, "Oh, maybe I should join the C-suite. Maybe I shouldn't. Like, will it really work for my business?" And you were once one of those people. So
Yeah.
with the 5 years of experience you've had, what would you say to those people who are on the fence, are thinking about committing to it, are thinking about doing the work? What advice would you give them?
Okay. I would say, number one, make a decision. Like, if you are thinking that selling to corporate is actually going to grow your business and your life, which for me it 100,000% has, make a decision. Once you've made the decision, then definitely get the C-suite. I mean, that, like, it's a no-brainer, right? Like, I can't even tell you, like, the price, in my opinion, is ridiculous compared to the value that you get in there. The community of people, like, I'm telling you, people in there, we're friends. Like, some of them, we've done work together. Like, we've partnered on things, they've come and delivered stuff for, like, anyway. Secondly, I would say follow the process, right? Like, because you've made a decision, then now you have to follow the process and trust that it's actually going to bring you the results, that if you actually do the work, right? Yeah, and make space in your life to actually allow it to happen, right? Because, like, the transformation doesn't happen when you buy the thing. The transformation happens when you do the work, right? But it starts with making a decision. Make a decision. This is the path, and trust the process. That's what I would say. And then using the hot seats, the group, for any mindset thing that comes up, because they will come up, right? Like any issues, any questions. If you're not sure about something, like, put it in a group, because there's lots of people there that have been there, done that, gone through every possible question that might come up, and getting the support that is needed. But it starts with making a decision. And when I say make a decision, I mean, literally, it's like when you marry someone and you make a decision, like, you don't marry someone and then 2 weeks later you're like, maybe I'm going to go on a date today. Like, no, you know what I mean? Like, you make a decision, you commit to the decision, and you follow through. And I think that's what I would say. Again, my results, if anyone wants to ask questions beyond this, I'm happy to answer them. But honestly, it's obvious, that it works. Yeah.
No,
I mean,
well,
yeah. You have enough stories and, testimonials, and it works. It will always work as much as you make it work for you, right?
honestly, you have been so generous in your sharing today. I know that people want to reach out and say thank you. And I think for you, LinkedIn is always the best way to connect.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you have learned anything from today, and I'm sure that you all will have, please do go and say thank you. I think it's such a difficult thing for people to show up in their own time and bring you guys the benefit of their experience and their breakthroughs and the things that they've learned. If you have had breakthrough moments from this episode, please do go and reach out to Ros on LinkedIn, and we'll pop your profile on there. And equally, if you're working with companies that you're like, oh, they need Ros, please do make that introduction, because that ultimately is how we all grow, right? We rise together. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. But hello, I love talking to you. So
I
this
can
is,
do
yeah,
this literally for hours. And I
yeah,
so appreciate you coming on today. I'm really excited. And for those of you who are attending the C-suite in-person days, I think you're coming along, aren't you, in the September one? If you are already inside the C-suite and you're coming along to our September in-person day for 2024, you will see Ros there. You can ask her lots of questions and look at her fabulous makeup, because I always am like, where do you get the lipstick? Like, how is it staying on? Like, I need. But thank you
you're
so
hilarious.
thank you so much today. I honestly really appreciate it. I know that everybody is going to be absolutely thrilled to hear about your successes, but also to learn from all the epic breakthroughs. So thank you so much for coming on today.
You're welcome.
And guys, if you have enjoyed this episode, like I say, do go and connect with Ros on LinkedIn. Do let her know what your breakthrough moments are, and we will see you in the next